Erika here with PrepScholar GRE. Here today to help you master your GRE timing strategy with GRE Verbal Time Management. If you like this video, subscribe for more great content and check us out at gre.prepscholar.com to learn more about what PrepScholar GRE can do for you. GRE Verbal Reasoning consists of two 30-minute sections, each with 20 questions. This means that we get a minute and a half on average to solve each verbal question. However, there are about a million different question types and formats on the GRE, some of which require more work than others. For instance, text completion questions with 2 blanks will take longer than text completion questions with 1 blank, and text completion questions with 3 blanks will take longer than text completion questions with 2 blanks. Similarly, the first reading comprehension question of any passage will be on your screen longer than any other question for the same passage, since we need to read the passage before we even start working on the question, and so on. All told, this means that we shouldn't stick to a rigid 90-second time limit for every question. So how can we ensure that we stay on track on timing? The first strategy is somewhat counterintuitive. Invest time up top to save time later on. There are a few steps in the process of solving a GRE verbal question that are more valuable than others and that make the following steps easier and quicker. We want to spend most of our time on those steps. The first valuable step is interpreting what the question is really asking for and what information we already have. Jumping too quickly into solving is a great way to miss out on the fundamentals of a question. For text completion and sentence equivalence, we want to invest our time in interpreting the relationships between the blanks or between a blank and another part of the sentence. Is the word in blank 3 a synonym of the word in blank 1? Is the part of the sentence containing the blank being contrasted with the previous part of the sentence? And so on. For reading comprehension, we want to invest our time in skimming the passage and interpreting as we go before even looking at the questions. Then, for each question, we want to invest our time in interpreting what the question is asking for. Is it the author's tone, the purpose of a paragraph, the meaning of a word in context? The second valuable step is predicting. On GRE Verbal, jumping straight into process of elimination is a guaranteed waste of time and a great way to fall into the test maker's wrong answer traps. For text completion and sentence equivalence, we want to make a prediction of what we would fill in the blank with if we had no answer choices. For reading comprehension, we want to predict how we would answer the question if it was free response instead of multiple choice. Now, these predictions do not have to be perfect. We don't need to find the perfect word or the most coherent answer. We just need a clear idea of what we're looking for in the correct answer. Then, all we need to do is match our prediction to an answer choice. No need to spend extra time getting convinced by wrong answer traps. Now, how do we ensure that we stay on track for timing throughout the section? First, recognize that GRE utilizes a minutes and seconds timer that counts down from the total amount of time per section to 0. This means that for each verbal section, the timer will read 30 minutes and 0 seconds when we start the section, and 0 minutes and 0 seconds when the section is over. So this means that when the clock reads 20 minutes, 10 minutes have elapsed since the start of the section, and we have 20 minutes left before the section ends. In your practice, make sure to use a countdown timer rather than a stopwatch to get used to quickly interpreting the timer you'll see on test day. Now, the GRE also gives us the option of hiding the timer. Now, this may be valuable if you look at the timer too frequently and distract yourself, but you'll never want to have the timer hidden for the whole section. Which leads me to the second point. Second, set checkpoints for yourself. Like we discussed earlier, each question is going to take a different length of time. This means that checking the timer after each question will do nothing but distract us. However, we should check in on our timing occasionally. I recommend checking in 1 to 3 times during each 20-question section. I personally like to look after questions 7 and 14, at which points I want to be about 10 and 20 minutes into the section respectively, or less. This means that I'll want to have about 20 and 10 minutes left on the timer respectively, or more. Now, of note, the verbal sections do not necessarily come right in a row. Sometimes they're broken up by 1, 2, or even 3 quant sections if we consider the possibility of an experimental quant section. This means that we need to be able to switch on our verbal timing mode at the drop of a hat. Having defined checkpoints specific to each verbal and quant will ensure that you have a clear course of action as soon as you know what type of section you're working with. Third, remember that because the test is section adaptive, we can skip around within a single section. This means that if a problem is eating up too much time, your best move is to come back to it later if you have time. The GRE makes this easy by providing a flag function for each question. This means that you can pop a flag on any question that you want to review later. Once you make it through every question in the section, you'll be taken to a screen where you can easily navigate between the 20 questions, as well as see which of the questions have flags. No hunting back through the section necessary. Now, the problems you decide to skip will be largely personal. What's time-consuming for another test taker may not be time-consuming for you, and what's time-consuming for you may not be time-consuming for another test taker. A good way to determine which problems to skip is to use the 30-second rule. At about 30 seconds into a given question, you should have a pretty good idea of how you're doing so far. So stop to ask whether or not you're going to be able to finish the question in a reasonable amount of time. If the answer is no, you can't, you're completely lost or you're spinning your wheels, rule out any obviously wrong answers, flag, and skip. Now, if the answer is yes, you can finish in a reasonable amount of time, keep going, but check back in when you hit that reasonable amount of time. If you aren't right at the answer, flag it and skip. Now, that said, as we mentioned earlier, some questions are innately more time-consuming than others, and often these questions are harder to get right. There is no partial credit on the GRE, and because of that, if you're behind time, questions with multiple answers are good candidates for skipping. That includes text completion with multiple blanks, all sentence equivalents, and reading comprehension multiple choice questions where you can select multiple correct answers. As an extension of this strategy, if we're pretty sure of an answer but want to check it to be absolutely sure, it's typically a good call to go ahead and enter our answer for now and skip that final check until we've had a chance to give each problem a fair shake first. We can always come back. Which leads us to the end of the section. If you've fully skipped any questions, you should save at least enough time to fill in a random answer for each of the questions. Remember, each verbal section is timed separately. This means that while we can skip around within a single section, we can't skip between questions in different sections. So when the timer of the section runs out, we'll never get another chance to answer those 20 questions. While the GRE considers unanswered questions exactly the same as missed questions, filling in a guess at least gives us a shot at getting the right answer by chance. And oftentimes, we've already ruled out a couple of obviously wrong answer options, so our chances are even higher. Ideally, though, we'll end up with enough time to complete our work through of the skipped questions, or to at least use process of elimination to further pare down our answer options before guessing. Now, hopefully at this point, we've had a chance to clear our minds of the problem and can approach it fresh. A new perspective is often all it takes to figure out what you were previously missing. Now, if you end up with extra time and have no questions left unanswered, you can revisit some of those questions that you wanted to check. If you're feeling confident on all of the questions and still have time left, you have a great chance to check your work. But be cautious. In general, second guessing leads to more wrong answers, so only change your previous answer if you notice a glaring error. Finally, if you notice that you are consistently far ahead of schedule on your practice tests and still aren't scoring as well as you'd like, slow down and focus on the invest time to save time strategy. And that's how you can master GRE Verbal Time Management. To recap, to master our timing strategy, we must accept that some questions take longer than others, invest time in interpreting and predicting to save time down the line, get used to the countdown timer, set checkpoints, skip questions and come back, utilizing the flag function, the 30-second rule, an appreciation that multi-answer problems are more time-consuming and harder to get right, and an understanding that we can always double-check our work at the end of the section. Use any remaining time to answer unanswered questions and check your work, being careful not to second-guess yourself. Thanks again for watching, and feel free to check us out at gre.prepscholar.com for more great GRE content. See you next time.